What if I told you that ancient civilizations buried their dead in ways so horrifying and chilling, they make modern-day horror movies look tame? Would you dare to explore the chilling secrets that lie beneath the earth? From cannibalistic ceremonies to unusual mummification of bodies, this is not your typical ancient history lesson. However, it will allow you to gain a deeper understanding of ancient cultures and their burial practices. Stay tuned to the end, where we reveal the most shocking and creepiest burial ritual of them all. Trust us, you'll be shocked and perhaps glad you did. First up, number 1. Honey mummification, mellification. Arabia, 800 BCE, 400 CE. In ancient Arabia, some bodies were preserved in honey. The concept of mummified man is mentioned by 16th century Chinese author Li Shizhen, who described a mythical practice where elderly individuals consumed only honey before death, and their bodies were submerged in honey for medicinal purposes. However, historical evidence for this practice remains questionable. Greek historian Herodotus, however, recorded that the ancient Assyrians embalmed their dead in honey, and Alexander the Great's body was reportedly preserved in a golden sarcophagus filled with honey. Let's go to ancient Persia next. Number 2. The Tower of Silence. Zoroastrian rituals. Persia, 5th century BCE to the present. Imagine bodies left to rot in the open while vultures tear them apart piece by piece. This was the chilling reality of the Zoroastrian Tower of Silence in ancient Persia. Instead of burial or cremation, Zoroastrians built massive circular structures known as the Towers of Silence to dispose of the dead. Bodies were placed on circular towers where they were devoured by scavenger birds, ensuring the soul's purity and protecting the elements of earth, water, and fire from contamination. It was believed that burying or burning the dead would pollute the elements. The thought alone sends shivers down the spine. While the practice is less common today, it still reportedly occurs in India and Iran. Number 3. The Plastered Skulls of Jericho. Ancient Levant, 9000 BCE. In one of the world's oldest known burial rituals, the ancient people of Jericho in the Levant region practiced a haunting custom of removing skulls from the deceased, plastering and painting them to resemble living faces, and displaying them in their homes. This was likely done to honor ancestors or as part of ancestor worship rituals. Next, let's travel to ancient Denmark. Number 4. The Bog Bodies, Denmark Iron Age. This is where bodies were sacrificed and left in eerie bogs, perfectly preserved for thousands of years. The Tolland man remains one of the most famous examples of this eerie practice. With his peaceful expression, with a noose still around his neck, tells a story of human sacrifice to appease unknown gods. But why did they do it? Some believe it was to prevent disaster, while others say it was a punishment worse than death. Many bog bodies across northern Europe does show evidence of ritual sacrifice. Number 5. Skull deformation, ancient Peru and Mesoamerica. In ancient Peru and Mesoamerica, skulls weren't just buried, they were reshaped. Using tight bindings, ancient cultures deformed the skulls of infants to create elongated, alien-like shapes. This practice was often associated with elite status and religious beliefs, giving the deceased a closer connection to the gods. But looking at these skulls today, it's hard not to feel a chill. Number 6. The Catacombs of Paris, France, 18th century. Beneath the bustling streets of Paris lies a labyrinth of bones, with the remains of over 6 million people stacked neatly along narrow corridors. In the 18th century, overcrowded cemeteries led to the transfer of remains to these catacombs, creating an eerie underworld of human remains. Today, visitors can walk through these haunting passageways, a stark reminder of mortality. Number 7. Heads on poles, Celts, ancient Britain and Gaul, 500 BCE, 100 CE. The ancient Celts believed that the head was the seat of the soul. After battle, decapitated enemy heads were placed on poles around the settlement as a way to protect the living and honor the gods. The heads often remained for years, decaying in public view. However, evidence suggests that these heads were often embalmed or preserved, not merely left to decay. Number 8. Excarnation, prehistoric Europe and North America. Excarnation, or the practice of defleshing the body, was a widespread prehistoric custom where bodies were left in the open for scavengers to consume the flesh, leaving behind clean bones. This practice has been linked to Neolithic cultures and Native American tribes, where it was believed that separating the flesh from the bones helped release the soul. Number 9. Hanging coffins of the Bo people, China 3000 BCE 500 CE. High up on cliffs, caves and rock faces in China, the Bo people practiced the eerie ritual of suspending wooden coffins hundreds of feet above the ground. Believing that the closer the deceased were to the heavens, the easier their journey to the afterlife, these suspended coffins have defied gravity and decay for centuries. This practice was also to protect the dead from scavengers and prevent evil spirits from disturbing the deceased. The sight of rotting coffins hanging precariously above was both terrifying and fascinating. Number 10. The Chowchilla mummies, Nazca culture, Peru 200-900 CE. The Nazca people of Peru mummified their dead and buried them in seated positions to prepare them for the afterlife. The most disturbing part? Some were rearranged posthumously to mimic lifelike poses, with eyes painted onto their skulls to appear alive. Number 11. Viking ship burials. The Norse, Scandinavia 800-1100 CE. Viking warriors were buried in ships with their weapons, slaves, and animals to accompany them in the afterlife. Sometimes the slaves were sacrificed and buried alive or burned with the deceased to serve them in Valhalla. Number 12. Bog acid mummification. The YDE girl, Netherlands 54 BCE. The YDE girl was a teenage girl sacrificed and thrown into a bog, where her body was naturally preserved by the acidic and oxygen-poor environment. Her body was so well preserved that even 2,000 years later her skin and hair remain intact. Number 13. The Strangled Wives Scythians, Central Eurasia, 900-200 BCE. Scythian warriors were buried with their wives, but not peacefully. The wives were strangled to death and placed in the burial chamber to accompany their husbands into the afterlife. Archaeological evidence shows multiple wives buried alongside chieftains in elaborate tombs. Number 14. Living Entombment Silla Kingdom, Korea 57 BCE, 935 CE. In the ancient Silla Kingdom of Korea, when a king or nobleman died, his servants and concubines were sometimes buried alive to serve him in the afterlife. Archaeological evidence reveals mass graves alongside royal tombs filled with sacrificial victims. Number 15. The Sitting Skeletons Dogon people, Mali to present day. The Dogon people of Mali placed their dead in sitting positions, bound tightly in cloth and positioned in caves. The seated position symbolized a state of eternal meditation, maintaining a connection between the living and the spiritual realm. Number 16. Face covering with gold Mycenaeans, Ancient Greece 1600-1100 BCE. The Mycenaeans buried their dead with gold death masks covering their faces, believing it would protect them in the afterlife. The most famous is the Mask of Agamemnon, an eerie and lifelike artifact that adds to the aura of death and mysticism. Number 17. Bone cleaning ritual, Torajan people, Sulawesi, Indonesia, 16th century to present day. The Torajan people perform manen, a ritual where they clean and redress the bones of their deceased relatives to show respect and devotion to ancestors. Families retrieve their deceased relatives from tombs, clean their remains, and redress them in fresh clothing before returning them to the tomb. This ritual is still practiced today. Number 18. The Smoked Corpses Kuku tribe, Papua New Guinea, 16th century present. The Kuku people of Papua New Guinea practice mummifying the dead by smoking their corpses over an open fire. This gruesome process preserves the bodies for generations. The mummified bodies are then placed in sitting positions overlooking the village, symbolizing their eternal watch over the living. This practice continues today in some remote regions. Number 19. The Capuchin Catacombs of Palermo, Italy, 16th-19th century CE. Although not ancient, the Capuchin catacombs in Palermo, Sicily, house thousands of eerily preserved mummified bodies dressed in formal attire, with some standing or positioned as if they were alive. The corpses remain on display, with skin, hair, and facial expressions intact. The most famous of these mummies is Rosalia Lombardo, a 2-year-old girl whose body remains shockingly well preserved due to expert embalming techniques. And last, number 20, the cannibal funeral feasts. The Wari culture, Peru 500–1000 CE. The Wari people of Peru practiced endo-cannibalism, consuming the flesh of the deceased during funeral ceremonies to absorb their spirit and honor their lives. Archaeological evidence reveals remains of bodies that were butchered, cooked, and served during funeral ceremonies. This act was seen as a way of absorbing the soul of the dead and honoring their life. Now that you've witnessed these chilling rituals, one thing is clear. Ancient civilizations had an unsettling relationship with death. But perhaps by understanding their fears and practices, we gain a deeper appreciation for the mysteries of life and death. If you've enjoyed uncovering these dark ancient burial secrets, hit that subscribe button. There's so much more to explore, and trust me, the best is yet to come.